Today I'm turning the ugliest fabrics I own into a beautiful quilt. These scraps were buried and forgotten, but not anymore. This is a wild rescue mission, and by the end of it, you will wonder why I ever called them ugly. Here's my scrap pile. I know it's getting out of hand. I've been busy using my newest fabrics and the scraps have been totally ignored. Sure, I have some lovely ones, but that's not what I'm after today. I'm digging for the ugly stuff. Ugly patterns, unsightly colors, even repulsive textures. Now, about the pattern. It's one of those classic quilts you've seen 100 times but never tried yourself. And if you have, you probably didn't realize it's perfect for using up your scraps, especially the ugly stuff. We are making a timeless 9-patch quilt, but with a little surprise. What is ugly fabric exactly? What's ugly for me may be beautiful for you. So even though I'm using the word ugly, what I mean is my least favorite fabrics. Let's say it like that, maybe, not hurt their feelings. We can do this first step 2 ways. We can cut our scraps into tiny 2.5-inch squares, and this is how you get rid of even the tiny bits of fabric you have lying around. Then you pick 3 squares and you sew them together. Let's press, and this is what it looks like. Second way is for those that, like me, have more strips of fabric than actual small pieces. We pick 3 strips of fabric that are at least 7.5 inches by 2.5 inches. And I have plenty of those. We sew the 3 strips together quickly. We press, and then we cut them into 3 strips of fabric. And this is what we get. 3 strips done in no time. Let's make some more strips. I need 2 of these strips we just made and 1 with a wide square in the middle for our 9-patch for both my warm and my cool color blocks. And yes, you can use any color you like. It doesn't have to be white, but it is my personal favorite, so I use it every chance I get. I will say that the solid color you use makes a big difference in the overall look and vibe of your quilt. Also, you can totally skip the solid square in the middle and just do 3 strips with pattern fabric for your 9 patches. They will still look stunning. We need to sew our strips together now, making sure we nest those seams. This is one of those blocks that you really need your seams to hit the right spot. It probably won't show if you skip a seam or 2, but if all the seams are off, that will make a big dent in the overall look of your quilt. So try your absolute best to get those seams just right. And the best way to do that is making sure that your seam allowance is as similar as you can possibly make it for all the blocks, assuming of course all squares are roughly the same size. Let's do the same thing for our cool color block. Let's press our blocks quickly. And this is what we've got. Our pretty 9-patch quilt blocks done with me fabric, but still looking pretty cool. We have 23 more blocks to go, so we better get moving. This was actually the pattern I picked when I made my first quilt ever. It was back in 2008. Here it is, the only photo I have of it. My first 2 quilts ever. Bad photo, pretty quilts. I was absolutely heartbroken when it got lost on the move from abroad, and I actually think of it more often than I should. I really loved this quilt. It was the first time I felt like a proper quilter, and honestly, I never tried to do it again. Until now, so I'm very excited. Like I said, if you do the 3 strips sewn together, you can get your blocks done so quickly, but at the same time, you get a lot of similar sides because you just cut the same 3 strips over and over again to make your blocks. So I guess the best way to do it is to mix things up and do a little bit of both. Now, about the fabric. How does one end up with enough ugly fabric to make a quilt? Well, maybe it's fabric for a specific project that required you to buy something you would never use otherwise. Maybe someone offered you some fabric, so you didn't pick it. Maybe you bought a bundle that had some fabric you loved and others, not so much. I have a couple of those, if I'm honest, from charm packs and jelly rolls. Or maybe you loved it when you bought it, you saw it and had to have it, and then you got home or some time went by and now you just don't get it. The best tip I can give you for using your less favorite fabrics is mixing things up. So you don't have to make a quilt using only those fabrics like I'm doing here today. You can mix them up with fabrics you love and it will all blend in together and hide the ugliness. Also, I live by the saying, if the fabric looks ugly, you just haven't cut it small enough. Because let's face it, you can't really tell if the fabric is ugly if you're using crumbs of it. And before you know it, we are done. Look at these, nothing ugly about them. There's not much to this. We mix the cools with the warms and that's pretty much it. Except I think we can do much better than just sewing the blocks together and be done. I'm thinking we need some sashing. Everything looks better with sashing, right? So yeah, I'm using some thin white sashing to separate my blocks and take this 9-patch quilt top up a notch or 10. Now, another common 9-patch pattern we see is instead of just mixing the warms with the cools, we also add a third variant where you have a collar square in the middle of the 9-patch and everything else is white. It's a cute option, but for me, it's kind of too white. I mean, even if the sashing is really thin, that's just not colorful enough for my taste. But you can give it a try. Make one block and see how you feel. This is a 5x5 block quilt top. It's tiny, but as usual, if you want to make a big quilt, just keep adding those blocks until you reach the size you want. This is just a sample of what your quilt can look like. Can you imagine if I made a full-blown quilt every week for my videos? I would run out of room and supplies. But if I was making a full quilt, as soon as those rows were sewn, I would totally do quilt as you go to make my quilt sandwich. That way you wouldn't show any quilting stitch on the top. It would all be about these pretty little squares. If I was to quilt it, however, I would just sew some straight lines on the sashing maybe, or just do a seam around each block. There are a lot of ways this quilt can be finished that will look super cool. It's the good thing about simple but stunning quilts, there's a lot of options. Here we have it, a simple but beautiful quilt filled with color even though our fabrics aren't anything special. All made out of scraps. I love it and I will see you soon. Bye bye!